Good morning. This is Lynn Johnson, the co-founder and CEO of Spotlight Girls, and I am here this morning with Aya De Leon, the amazing performer, writer, and teacher, and also Go Girls mama, who I'm talking to today because Aya is one of our tellers who will be performing at our upcoming event, Telling, a Celebration of Girlhood on September 25th in Berkeley. And we have an opportunity now to sit down today and get to know each other. I have been such an admirer of yours for the I don't know, last decade or so since I've been here in the Bay. And so I'm just so honored to have you talking to me today and sharing about your work and your mothering. And so let's jump right in, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So I know that you started your career really in the hip hop world. And so can you kind of tell us a little bit about your experiences as a woman and performer in that world, which is pretty male dominated and still remains so.
Yes, unfortunately it is. I started out in spoken word and performance and hip hop theater, and from the time I was a teenager, when hip hop was sort of exploding in the Bay, I was interested, but because I was a girl, it was hard for me to see myself in hip hop, and I sort of secretly wrote rhymes and didn't really perform them anywhere, and then diverted off into, I'd been working on fiction and spoken word, and had developed just a little bit of a name for myself in spoken word. And God, I went to this hip hop show and it was so sexist and I was so mad, and I wrote something about it, and I went to a slam poetry event and I read it, and there was this band and I was kind of rapping, and then the band started playing, and then I won the slam, and then people were like, and then people started asking me to do hip hop events, and I was like, I'm not a rapper, in that way that we as women internalize the sense of like what we can't do. And yet, as much as I wasn't a rapper, I was going around doing hip hop events. So suddenly I realized like, oh, look, I'm having a life in hip hop. So it was really, it was one of those things where I sort of wandered into being a hip hop artist in spite of all my stories about what I couldn't do. And then at some point really embraced it and realized that, that I had an opportunity as a woman, and particularly as a feminist, to take a stand, and that I was being called to take a stand because it was this sort of really intensely sexist and misogynist environment that needed female voices to stand up against the misogyny, and I was being called. So at a certain point you realize, oh, I've got to do this. And so I did, and I did it for a number of years, and it was really powerful. I faced a lot of fear, and I know there are young women MCs coming up who remember those years when they were kind of like in their teens and tweens, seeing a woman sort of standing, speaking about sexism in hip hop and fighting against it.
So what was it about the art form that really attracted you, despite the things that repelled you? What attracted you to spoken word, to hip hop?
Well, I think, part of it for me in all of that is that I'm very much an extrovert, and I've been wanting for many years to write a novel, but writing fiction means a lot of sitting by yourself in a room. And so there was this lure of sort of spoken word and hip hop where you could be engaging with people much more immediately, right? Like with spoken word, I can write the piece today, then go to the open mic tonight and be interacting with people. But with fiction, like, you're writing for years and years, maybe you're reading a little piece of it at some work in progress environment, but people can't fully connect, right? Because it's really a bigger story. So I think for me, a lot of the lure was the performance element. And I grew up doing theater and loved it. And, while I didn't pursue it for a number of reasons, in a large part having to do with sexism and, what it would mean to be a woman trying to pursue theater or television and body image, just all that racism, all that stuff. But I loved performing, and I still do. And so there was a lot there for me to be able to blend the writing and the performance, and interacting with an audience was lovely. And I did it for many years. But then I wanted to become a mom, and performing is like nighttime, nightclub, jet plane and situation. And it didn't feel really compatible with the kind of mom I wanted to be. So I kind of did all the things I wanted to do in that before having a kid.
So, okay. So when you said you grew up doing theater, did you grow up feminist as well? Like, what was your feminist journey? It seems like you had a feminist identity before meeting hip hop. Is that true?
That's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it was happening around the same time. I think I was a feminist. I was a teen feminist. But it's interesting, and
That's
I know
a good title for something.
I know. I was professional. I was, and I think, but it's interesting because there were these areas in my life that I couldn't, like, some things were immediately obvious, like I'm a feminist and therefore this particular behavior I will change, or this particular behavior I will or won't engage in. And then there were other places where the internalized stuff made it difficult to immediately see where the feminism would influence my behavior. Like, I think around hip hop, I was like, I tried, but I was scared. But also there wasn't like a posse at the time. Like, if there had been a crew of women around me who had been like, yeah, let's become rappers, I'd have been like, yeah, let's do it. But at the time, there wasn't, or at least there wasn't around me that I had access to. So I sort of hung back in a more solitary way. I think it was a lot of the places where my feminism couldn't quite reach initially, a lot had to do with places where I was isolated, or places where I didn't have folks helping me think things through. And hip hop was definitely that. Like, I felt, I think also I grew up in Berkeley, and Berkeley was is a real interesting mixed bag, and always has been, of sort of progressivism, but also mainstream, very mainstream, and integration and segregation. So I think also for me as a teenager, I didn't have a crew of Black girls, and I definitely didn't have a crew of rapper girls of any color. And then also hip hop was very much a Black thing. Like, now it's become more mainstream, and most young people have a relationship to the music and the culture, but then it was like that Black music,
Right. It was, yeah. That's right. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I mean, like, for me personally, I grew up kind of understanding a racial identity and what it meant to be like an African American person. But I didn't grow up in a household or a culture that focused much on feminism. I mean, and so it wasn't until I got to college, it was about like 19, where I kind of started taking women's studies class, and was like, whoa, like my mind was blown.
Yeah.
And then I was a whole different person, and had to kind of, put all that together, and then now there's like, everyone's talking about intersectional feminism, and I wish I understood that. I wish I had that term when I was 19.
Right, because then you were just living it.
Right. And so it's interesting, to kind of come to such a come into this at the same time that you're discovering this very like Black male art form, right? As this woman who's like kind of coming into her feminism. It's just an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and it's not surprising that at the time I couldn't figure out how to integrate them. Like, I couldn't, and I had this, and for me at the time, a lot of the feminism that I was around were white feminists, some kind of peers and other sort of older white mentors, like in their 20s and 30s. And I think it was incredibly helpful for me as a young woman to have that critical lens of feminism to look through. But it was also, there were some, I don't want to say downsides, but there were some complexities that I couldn't figure out at the time because I wasn't learning about Black feminism or Latina feminism. Like, it was definitely like I was this Black girl getting information from very white dominated feminism, which was really helpful. But there were parts of my life that I needed to be chewing on issues of race and gender simultaneously in a community of women of color to be able to really figure out, like, okay, here's how I want to move forward in my life.
Yeah. So let's move forward in your life. And so now you mentioned now you're a mom and you have a daughter, and it sounds like you made this choice to kind of put down performing, to kind of be present, not on the road, not in the clubs, for your daughter. So how does all of it come together for you now, as an artist, as a mom, as a feminist? Like, where are you showing up in all those parts of you and for your daughter?
Well, the first thing that I will say is, I really waited a long time to become a mom. So I got pregnant and had my daughter at 41.
Uh-huh.
So I was really pushing it. And, and I didn't see myself. Some people are performers. That's who they are. That's like the core of who they are and what they want to do with their whole life and where they want to make a contribution. So I wasn't necessarily that person. Like, I enjoy it, but it wasn't sort of the heart of my artwork. The heart of my artwork is the writing. So I wasn't trying to be, 60 still out there doing it. And I'm like, woo, to people who that's their passion and they do.
Yeah.
But I always was seeing it as sort of like something that would have, not an end, but, sort of have an arc and have a landing point. So I did all the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be on Def Poetry, and I wanted to, like, develop a whole show and, get reviews. I sort of have that sense of, like, I have been to the mountain, that I did what I wanted to do there. And then I returned to what was really my first love, which was writing fiction, which was much more compatible with parenting. And I have, like, photographs of my, like, whatever, little looking down at my daughter while she's sleeping on my chest while I'm, like, desperately trying to edit this chapter. And return to writing a novel. I'd worked on several novels, but there was a particular one that I was trying to actually get out to publication. And so that for me has been the place in my motherhood where I've been wanting to really create a body of public work. I also have done a lot of blogging and a lot of contributing to different, media outlets. But the fiction has been sort of my passion, where it's like I have a vision of what I want something to look like, and then, kind of doing the work to manifest that has been my work. And my vision really over the last, God, at this point, pushing a decade, is this kind of fiction that has women of color at the center, but that's really for the masses. So playing with a lot of tropes, a lot of genre, playing with romance, playing with the thriller, but then also having these sort of feminist and social justice themes that are, like, really, intense, politically intense and hardcore, but then sort of wrapping them up in a steamy beach read and sending it off to the masses. So, like, I like the idea of this subversive political material that's like, ooh, shopping, sexiness. So that's been what I've been working on as sort of my stealth feminist project.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And your novel just came out, Uptown Thief, right? Which you describe as a feminist heist novel.
Yes.
Such a cool description. And tell us a little bit about the book. I know that this book is not for our go-girls.
No.
But for those of us who want to put our girls to bed and have a little steamy experience.
A little grown-up time.
Tell us about Uptown Thief.
Yeah, well, it's a story of a Latina woman in New York who runs a women's health clinic. So it's very much about feminist healthcare. And, the economy tanks, and she's, like, so committed to her nonprofit that she basically returns to a life of crime and gets involved in a number of criminal enterprises to support her nonprofit, including robbing these corrupt corporate CEOs, and then eventually heists a billionaire. So it's a heist story with this group of women you know, kind of a multicultural cast of women who are, you know, trying to support this community-based nonprofit. And, you know, it fits into all these different kind of genres. It's the heist novel, it's the crime novel, it's the, you know, romance novel, it's the chick lit novel, but really inside of it are these heavy themes of, you know, feminist healthcare and wealth redistribution. So
that is so cool. That is so cool. One of the reasons why we're producing the event Telling on the 25th is because there just aren't enough stories in the kind of public discourse, in movies and TV, books, where there are that kind of, where the diversity of kind of women, and not just like diverse women, like women in different colors, but like the, you know, the complexity of our experience, like, you know, like that going beyond the stereotypes and whatever, to be like, oh, like women have all these different kinds of experiences, whatever, and girls. And so, you know, you are one of our tellers, kind of telling, like, just bringing diversity of stories of girls center stage. Like, that's like what we're trying to do. And so I think that's so great that you have, that's what your feminism is, this kind of bringing these stories, this heist novel, but like in ways that we have not really experienced them before. With women at the center of the story, and complex women.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm excited about potentially, you know, for this book, and it's the first in a series, the Justice Hustlers series.
Ooh, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I know, fun. One of the things that I'm excited about with it has to do with class, right? And in terms of socioeconomic class and literature, like it's just a really segmented system. Like these are the books that working class women of color are supposed to be reading, and these are the books that middle class white women are supposed to be reading, and sort of, you know, women of color who, you know, maybe are mixed class or college educated, you can pick, but, you know, like there are these different camps of books. And so I was excited to write a book that potentially could be read by, you know, an 18-year-old young woman of color who's like in a low income community, who's not necessarily going to college, and could also be appealing to, you know, like a white upper middle class progressive woman who, you know, is whatever, a professional or whatever, you know, that people could be connecting with and identifying with this story that had these women of color in the center of it, that was really feminist and really political. And that there's something about kind of our shared stories, like you said, the stories that we identify with. There was something exciting to me about that. And there's just, you know, there aren't enough places for women to tell stories. And I'm such, you know, like I'm one of those sort of like, you know, obsessive feminist moms who's like, every book I'm like flipping through it, like, where are the girls? Where are the brown people? How are they drawing the bodies? Like, you know, is this thing I want my daughter to see? And it's shocking, you know, how hard it is to find stories of brown women, you know, there's like the 2 books, you know, that you've read like 1,000 times. And she's like, I'm ready for the chapter book, you know, or whatever. It's hard. It's hard to find. And a lot of times we have to write them. And, you know, sometimes we have to color in the actual books. My mom did that when I was a kid. She would color in the books with a Sharpie to make the kids brown. And, you know, yeah. But yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that I was so thrilled to be invited to be part of Telling, because I think, you know, this is the oral history. You know, they're the books, and it's great. You know, I write books and I, you know, support books and buy books, but it's also like we have to create those oral history moments, because all those books aren't going to get published. And these stories that we have just really matter. And the girls are just like listening like this when we're telling them the stories, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I had a moment on Labor Day, you know, my family and I decided to do a pretty suburban like, let's go to the mall and the movies. And so we went to the movies and saw that The Secret Life of Pets. And it was cute. It was really funny. It barely passed the Bechdel test.
Right. You're like,
it was very, I watched it, you know, I was kind of like laughing, but also kind of cringing. And one of my favorite moments as a feminist mom was my daughter looked over to me in the middle of the movies and was like, Mommy, why are they all boys? I was like, oh.
They're pets.
And I was like, that's a good question. She's like, and she sounded just like me. It's how I talk whenever we're watching TV together. I was like, oh, that's so, why are all their bodies the same? Huh, that's so weird. So she was like, Mom, that's so weird. I was like, yes, 7 years old. Let's just start building those critical skills about engaging with media.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have to say, as a mom, you know, that's one of the reasons I was so delighted to find Go Girls and Spotlight Girls, because, you know, like, I am the vigilant mom who's like always checking every environment out, you know, and is like previewing everything. And, you know, my daughter's seen like 2 movies because I'm always like, these movies, you know, so it's like I'm so vigilant. And it was like incredible for me that that I could send her during the summer to camp, you know, for the whole day, and know that the values that I hold so dear were going to be reflected, right? That it wasn't like, well, better pick over 3 to start the deprogramming, you know?
The deprogramming.
Exactly. Was so great, you know, and like, not just, you know, I was over the moon when I got the little handout that you taught the Bechdel test. I like called my friends, they're teaching the Bechdel test at the Feminist Theater Summer Camp. I'm so happy. You know, but like, it's not just an opportunity to think about the stories that we're telling, but also like an opportunity to turn the lens on the world. What's happening out there, you know, so that that there's that critical thinking, but also the emotional literacy, right? Because are we okay?
Yeah, you went out for a second, but you're back.
Yes. Okay. So also the emotional literacy for me is really critical, because I think, you know, going back to what we were talking about in terms of my own feminist development, the places where I got stuck as a feminist and couldn't enact my principles were places where I didn't have the emotional intelligence to understand what was going on, where I had big feelings and didn't know how to manage them. I think that those were the places that really got in the way of me being able to always be in alignment with my feminist values, when I didn't know how to manage my emotions or understand them or know where they came from, or, you know, connect the dots between experiences I had had and struggles I was having. And so I think that was really, really critical. And so how incredible was it for there to be this environment that I could send my daughter to that was, you know, a combination of critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and the arts, right? Like, yes. So it's great. And I think, you know, it's like the whole time my daughter was there, she just loved it. And, you know, so many times it wasn't like feeding her the broccoli. You know, you're like, this is good for you. Come on. It was very much the opposite. It was like so delicious for her, you know, in terms of the creativity and the camaraderie. Just, yeah, it was thrilling for me as a mom.
Well, thank you. We want all girls from all backgrounds to be able to have the experiences that you and I had growing up as artists, right? Being able to, you know, people, whether they become professional artists or not, we know that it is through those experiences of being able to like have an idea, realize an idea,
yes,
put it out there, perform it in some way, and especially in collaboration with an ensemble of other people who are all working for the same thing. I mean, that there's nothing else like that.
that's
And
right.
so, it's so important for our girls to be able to have that experience. So like, you know, you're such a shining example of, you know, who we want our girls to look up to, being able to say like, yeah, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I want to say in the world. And we just need more and more women like that.
Well, yeah, and I have to say, like, Go Girls and Spotlight Girls is raising that group of girls, because I think, you know, going back to what I said about isolation, like, that was the place where it just gets really hard to enact your values when you're isolated. And I think, you know, one of the strengths of feminism is the places where it brings women together. And one of the vulnerabilities of feminism is the places where it encourages us to kind of boldly go forth into places where women haven't been allowed, or, you know, where there are a lot of structural barriers to women entering. And a lot of times in those environments, we enter alone. And that's really tough. But part of it, you know, I came from a different era, and, you know, people hadn't thought through certain things. So there were places where I was really isolated. But I think that part of what environments like Go Girls and Spotlight Girls, it builds the expectation among girls and young women that they will have a posse of people backing them. And then in having that expectation and having the relationship skills, then wherever they go, they will build that support network that they need in order to thrive where they go. So I think that those are, you know, those kinds of relationship building skills, like all emotional labor that women do, are often overlooked, you know, but it's great to see that being built in to the model and to the experience for girls to expect to have that kind of really caring support.
Yeah, gosh, that's a real nice reflection on what we're doing. We're gonna wrap up in a second, but I just really need to hear just a little bit about your daughter. She's 7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of a cliche question, but like, what are your hopes for her? You know, I'm hearing you say, you know, it's hard to be like, you know, someone like you who has ambition and, like, you know, in the world and doing things like, sometimes it's like, are we pushing our daughters to do that like we do? Or like, you know, what is your hope for her given where you've come from and what you believe in the world?
Right. What a good question. Well, I think the biggest hope that I have for her is that connection that she, you know, I think historically one of the most vicious things of sexism is that it's offered us this false choice, but a choice that gets reinforced by the institutions of the society and by, you know, racism and sexism, which is that we can either be ourselves or we can be loved and, you know, connected. And there's been that sort of false, and, you know, I mean, in some ways it's not false, in that in a sexist society, women who are authentic get a lot of negative reinforcement, and women who are, like, you know, constantly modeling ourselves to be what people want to see and hear and whatever, get a lot of positive reinforcement. So but the lie is that it should be that way, right? Or that it has to be that way. And so that's really what I want. Like, I really want to raise a girl who is deeply invested in figuring out her authentic self, and that complicated thing that, you know, is paradoxical and has contradictions, but I want her to have the capacity to hold as much contradiction and complexity of, like, a human person and a girl and woman of color. I want her to have that. And I want her to be connected to a community of people who will reflect different parts of her, and some will be a lot like her and some will be really different from her. But I think that at the core is really what I would want for her. And I would want that for a son as well, you know, and there would be different obstacles, structural in terms of gender construction, and boys be different obstacles to that. But that's what I really want for her. And I want And I also want there to be room for her to have places of confusion about it. I
Mhm.
think one of the things that's hard when you're a feminist who's figured out certain things, like, oh, that was a bunch of bull and that was a lie, there can be a place where we want our kids to just sort of spring forth, not, not believing the hype, right? Like, and that they're vulnerable in a way that we're not. And so the other thing that I want her to have is a place to sort of, but the Barbie's so pretty, or whatever it is, right? That she can, okay, like, you get to be there right now, and I'm still not buying it for you, but you get to have that feeling. My line is like, when you're 18, you can have all the Barbies you want. But, like, you get, like, there's got to be that place where, for me, there's got to be that place, whether it's Barbie or this or that hairdo or the makeup, whatever, all those things that are getting marketed to women and girls, like,
Yeah.
buy this, buy this, buy this, that whatever the shiny thing is that's attractive, that there's no shame in finding it appealing, but there's maybe a limit about whether or not you can have it as part of the ability to integrate, right? That,
Yes.
she gets to try on different things. Some of them I will and won't like. And I think the other gift for me was people telling me that it was okay. Like, somehow I haven't failed as a mom if my daughter is attracted to stuff that I was just like horribly sexist or like, frozen, whatever it is coming through. And so that's what I hope, that basically that she gets to be herself, that she gets to be connected, and that I get to be patient and compassionate with her process as she encounters this crazy world, and that I'm supporting her to make sense of it, but that there's some room for her to figure it out on her own, and hopefully being able to develop that resiliency and media and consumer literacy and critical thinking to be able to see through certain consumer traps and sexism traps and stuff, to be
Yes.
able to find herself. So I guess those are my hopes.
That's fantastic. Those are our hopes for your daughter as well. And I love that we get to be part of helping you make her into that in whatever small way we can be part of that. So besides coming to see you on the 25th in Berkeley, how else can we keep up with you? Where can we buy your book? Can we join do you have a list? Where can we keep up with you?
Yes, well, the easiest place is my website, ayadeleon.com, AYADELEON.com. I'm also on Twitter. I love Twitter, tweeting about these same issues: feminism, motherhood, feminist heists, literature, and that's at Aya De Leon.
Cool.
And and since the book came out, I'm enthusiastically performing around town here and there. And the good news is it's a series, and next June there will be a second book.
Oh, fantastic. Oh my gosh. I can't wait. Thank you so much, Aya. This has been such a fantastic conversation, and I hope that it's just one of the first.
Well, it's a joy to be here, and Spotlight Girls is one of the most exciting kind of organizations / businesses / visions that I've seen as a mom, and I'm thrilled to participate and glad to support however I can.
Thank you. Thank you so much.